A war-weary drifter meets the Lakota healer. Welcome back to Native Legends and History Stories. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming stories. Today, we're stepping into the war-torn world of 1866 Mississippi, where the echoes of cannon fire still linger in the air. Ethan Cole, a man hardened by the battles he's survived, rides his weary horse through a landscape scarred by conflict. The once familiar sights of his homeland are now alien and unsettling. The sweet scent of spring flowers can't mask the ever-present stench of gunpowder and death that clings to Ethan's senses. Ethan's a man haunted by memories. He fought bravely for his cause, but now with the war ended, he's left with a gnawing emptiness. Each mile he travels brings back the horrors of the battlefield, the faces of fallen comrades, the deafening roar of cannons, and the crushing weight of guilt that seems to grow heavier with every passing day. He finally reaches his family's homestead, only to find it in ruins. The house, once a symbol of warmth and life, has crumbled into decay. The fields, once fertile and productive, now lie barren and neglected. Nature has begun to reclaim what was once cultivated by human hands. A chilling silence hangs over the land, a stark contrast to the bustling activity that once filled his days. Ethan can't bear to linger among the ruins of his past. He must move on, but where can a man broken by war find solace? With a heavy heart and dwindling hope, Ethan makes a decision. He will head west, seeking a fresh start, a chance to escape the pain that haunts him. Perhaps, somewhere beyond the towering mountains, he can find a reason to keep going, a reason to believe in a future worth living. 2 days into his westward journey, as the sun dips below the horizon, Ethan stops to make camp near the edge of a dense forest. He unsaddles his horse, the animal's sides heaving from the day's exertions. The evening air is cool, a welcome relief from the heat of the day, and the only sound is the chirping of crickets. Ethan hunkers down by the campfire, the flames dancing and casting flickering shadows around him. He eats a simple meal of bread and dried meat, savoring the temporary peace. But the tranquility is shattered when a low growl cuts through the silence. Ethan freezes, his senses on high alert. He slowly turns his head, his hand instinctively reaching for the rifle by his side. Just beyond the reach of the firelight, 2 yellow eyes gleam menacingly in the darkness. A wolf emerges from the shadows, its teeth bared, its hackles raised. It's a creature of the wild, hungry and dangerous. Ethan's horse whinnies nervously, tugging at its reins. "Easy, boy," Ethan murmurs, his voice calm and reassuring, trying to soothe the frightened animal. He rises slowly, his rifle held firmly in his hands, but not yet raised. He knows better than to provoke the predator. The wolf growls again, its eyes fixed on Ethan, inching closer. Ethan's heart pounds in his chest, but his hands remain steady. He's a man who has faced death before, and he won't back down now. The campfire casts long dancing shadows, illuminating the wolf's lean, powerful frame. Ethan stands his ground, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. "Go on," he says softly, his voice steady despite the tension that crackles in the air. "There's nothing here for you." The wolf hesitates, its ears twitching, as if considering his words. Ethan takes a small step forward, raising his rifle just enough to fire a warning shot into the dirt. The sharp crack of the gun echoes through the silent forest, and the wolf snarls before finally retreating back into the darkness. Ethan exhales, lowering his rifle. His hands tremble slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through his veins. It's a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk in this untamed wilderness. He glances at his horse, stroking its mane to calm the skittish animal. "It's all right," he says quietly, more to himself than to the horse. As the night deepens, Ethan keeps the fire burning brightly, his rifle close at hand. The frontier is a wild and unpredictable place, full of danger and uncertainty. But Ethan knows there's no turning back. His journey westward has only just begun. A few days later, Ethan finds himself pushing through unfamiliar terrain. The dense forest around him is eerily quiet. He doesn't mind the silence. It gives him time to think, to reflect on the events that have led him to this point. But as he navigates the uneven path, fatigue begins to creep in. His supplies are running low, and the lack of proper rest weighs heavily on him. Suddenly, Ethan's horse stumbles, and he's thrown to the ground. Pain shoots through his leg as he hits the dirt. Grimacing, he tries to stand, but his ankle gives way beneath him. He clenches his teeth, his face contorted in pain, and drags himself to a nearby tree, leaning against it to catch his breath. Ethan's horse struggles to regain its footing, its front leg clearly injured and swollen. It lets out a soft whinny, favoring its hurt leg. But Ethan is not alone in his plight. Unbeknownst to him, a pair of eyes watches him from the shadows. Tala, a Lakota woman, crouches behind a cluster of trees, observing the scene unfold. The vibrant spring forest, bursting with new life, stands in stark contrast to the turmoil within her. The massacre of her village has left her with deep scars, forcing her to become a solitary survivor, trusting no one. The loss of her family and home is a constant ache in her heart, a burden she carries silently as she navigates the wilderness. The memory of that horrific day continues to haunt her. The raging fire, the piercing screams, the chilling realization that she was the sole survivor. She had fled into the familiar embrace of the wilderness, making survival her sole purpose. But as she witnesses Ethan's struggle, something within her awakens, a flicker of empathy, a recollection of her own vulnerability and pain. After a moment of hesitation, Tala steps out from her hiding place, her movements cautious yet deliberate. Ethan's hand instinctively reaches for his rifle, but the pain in his ankle slows his reaction. Tala raises a hand in a gesture of peace. "I can help," she says, her voice firm yet calming. Ethan eyes her warily, taking in her worn clothing and the quiet strength in her demeanor. He's in no position to refuse assistance, but trust is a hard-earned commodity for a man who has seen too much violence. After a moment of contemplation, he nods, lowering his hand from his weapon. Tala approaches slowly, kneeling beside Ethan to examine his ankle. Her touch is gentle yet assured. "It's sprained," she says, glancing up at him. "You'll need rest and something to reduce the swelling." Ethan grunts in acknowledgement. "Name's Ethan," he manages after a moment. "Appreciate the help." Tala doesn't reply immediately. Her gaze shifts to the injured horse, which is limping heavily. She runs her hands over its swollen leg, then shakes her head. "It won't make it far," she says softly. "Neither will you if you try to ride." Ethan sighs heavily, his jaw clenching. The horse had been his faithful companion, carrying him this far, a tangible link to his westward journey. But looking at the animal's pained eyes, he knows what he must do. With a heavy heart, he unbuckles the saddle and bridle, setting the horse free. The animal hesitates for a moment, as if reluctant to leave his side, before limping off into the dense undergrowth. Ethan watches until it disappears from sight, a strange emptiness settling in his chest. "You did the right thing," Tala says, rising to her feet. Ethan remains silent, his thoughts swirling. Finally, he adjusts the makeshift crutch he's fashioned and nods towards Tala. "Guess it's just us now." Tala hesitates before responding. "Let's move, this place isn't safe." Ethan and Tala set off on foot, their footsteps the only sound in the quiet forest. The silence between them is heavy at first, the silence of two strangers brought together by circumstance, their bond forged in necessity rather than trust. Tala leads the way, her steps light and sure, a testament to her familiarity with the terrain. Ethan follows, leaning on his makeshift crutch to ease the burden on his injured ankle. "You seem to know your way around here," Ethan observes, breaking the silence. Tala glances back at him briefly. "It's where I grew up." Ethan catches the hint of sadness in her voice. He senses a story there, a painful past she's not ready to share. He doesn't press her, respecting her silence. Instead, he focuses on the path ahead, appreciating the beauty of the ancient forest, the towering pines, the vibrant wildflowers, and the occasional rustle of small creatures hidden in the underbrush. The path narrows, hemmed in by tall trees on either side. The air is still, with only the occasional whisper of leaves in the breeze. Tala slows her pace, looking back at Ethan. "We're getting close to a stream," she says. "Should be good for refilling our canteens." Ethan nods, grateful for the chance to rest. His ankle is slowly healing, but the journey is taking its toll. They move cautiously, their footsteps amplified in the quiet forest. As they approach the stream, a sudden low growl shatters the silence. Ethan freezes, his hand instinctively going to his rifle. Tala raises a hand, signaling him to stop. From behind a thicket of bushes, a massive black bear emerges, its eyes fixed on them with predatory intensity. It rises onto its hind legs, towering over them, and lets out a deafening roar. "Don't run," Tala says quickly, her voice low and urgent. "It'll chase us." Ethan's grip tightens on his rifle. "What do we do?" Tala steps forward, her hunting knife drawn. "We make it think we're not worth the trouble." The bear drops to all fours, its growls deep and menacing. It inches closer, its massive paws crunching on the dry leaves. Ethan raises his rifle but hesitates. He knows a single shot might not be enough to bring down such a formidable beast. "Tala!" he shouts, but before he can finish his warning, the bear charges. Ethan fires a shot into the air, the sound echoing through the trees. The bear hesitates momentarily, giving Tala just enough time to react. With a surge of adrenaline, Tala seizes a sturdy branch from the ground, yelling to divert the bear's attention. "Over here!" she shouts, waving the branch provocatively. The bear, its massive form lumbering, turns towards her, its eyes fixed on the moving target. Ethan steadies his rifle, carefully taking aim. His ankle throbs in protest as he shifts his weight, but he pushes through the pain, his focus unwavering. Just as the bear lunges at Tala, Ethan fires. The shot grazes the bear's shoulder, causing it to bellow in pain. The bear recoils slightly, but its aggression remains undiminished. Tala, nimble and quick, darts around the bear, using her agility to keep its attention divided. "Ethan, now!" she shouts, her voice a sharp command in the tense atmosphere. Ethan fires again, this time aiming for the ground near the bear's paws. The sound of the gunshot and the impact of the bullet hitting the earth so close to it seemed to finally deter the creature. It growls, its ears flattening against its head, and finally turns, retreating into the woods with heavy, reluctant steps. Ethan lowers his rifle, breathing heavily, his body trembling from the exertion and the adrenaline coursing through him. Tala drops the branch, her hands shaking slightly as the tension of the encounter begins to subside. "Are you all right?" Ethan asks, his voice strained with concern. Tala nods, her expression serious. "And you?" Ethan manages a weak smile. "Better now," he replies, his eyes filled with admiration as he looks at Tala. "You were incredible back there." Tala shakes her head, dismissing his praise. "We were both lucky," she says. "Out here, every mistake can be your last." Ethan's smile fades as he nods in agreement. He knows she's right, but despite the ever-present danger, he feels a sense of reassurance, a comforting feeling that they are not facing this unforgiving wilderness alone. Later that day, as they journey deeper into the wilderness, they reach a narrow pass flanked by steep rock walls. Tala slows her pace, her eyes scanning their surroundings with practiced caution. Ethan notices her shift in demeanor and instinctively tightens his grip on his rifle. "What is it?" he asks, his voice low. "Could be bandits," Tala replies quietly, her eyes darting towards the ridges above. They often lie in wait along these paths. Before Ethan can respond, a sharp whistle cuts through the air. 3 figures materialize on the ridgetop, their rifles trained menacingly on the travelers below. Their leader, a grizzled man with a scar slashing across his cheek, shouts down to them. "Travelers, eh?" he sneers. "Hand over your supplies, and we might just let you live." Ethan and Tala exchange a knowing glance. They are outnumbered and outgunned, but surrender is not an option. "You're not getting anything from us," Ethan calls back, his voice firm and resolute. The leader sneers. "Wrong answer," he spits back. The bandits descend the ridge, and the peaceful silence erupts into chaos. Ethan fires his rifle, forcing one of the bandits to scramble for cover. Tala moves with lightning speed, her knife flashing in the sunlight as she disarms another attacker. Ethan, ignoring the throbbing pain in his ankle, swings the butt of his rifle at the leader, catching him off guard and knocking him off balance. The fight is swift and brutal, but within moments the bandits are in retreat, their curses echoing through the trees as they disappear. Ethan lowers his rifle, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Tala wipes her blade clean, her movements steady despite the lingering tension. "You all right?" Ethan asks, his voice laced with concern. Tala nods. "You fight well for a man with a bad ankle," she observes, a hint of amusement in her voice. Ethan chuckles, the tension easing slightly. "Guess I had a good reason to," he replies, his eyes meeting hers. Tala's expression softens. "Thank you," she says sincerely, "for standing with me." Ethan shrugs, but his gaze lingers on hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Couldn't let them hurt you," he murmurs. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and purple, Ethan and Tala make camp by a quiet riverbank. The gentle sound of water flowing over smooth stones fills the air, blending with the crackling of the campfire they have built. Tala sits near the fire, sharpening her knife with practiced ease. Ethan sits opposite her, leaning against a log, his injured ankle stretched out before him. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on their faces, amplifying the silence that has settled between them. "You've been quiet today," Ethan observes, breaking the stillness. Tala pauses in her task, glancing up at him briefly before returning her attention to her blade. "I'm always quiet," she replies simply. Ethan chuckles softly. "Fair enough," he concedes. They lapse back into silence, the soothing sounds of the river providing a tranquil backdrop. After a while, Tala speaks again, her voice softer this time. "You're different from most men I've encountered out here," she says. "Most wouldn't have risked their neck for someone like me." Ethan tilts his head, his brow furrowing in question. "Someone like you?" Tala meets his gaze, her dark eyes steady but guarded. "A survivor," she explains. "Someone who no longer belongs anywhere. My Lakota people had a place, a home, but it's gone now." Ethan leans forward, his expression softening with understanding. "I know what it feels like to lose everything," he says, his voice filled with empathy. "To feel like there's nothing left for you." He pauses, his gaze unwavering. "But you belong, Tala. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Tala doesn't respond immediately. She stares into the fire, her expression unreadable. But in the silence, a flicker of gratitude shines in her eyes, a quiet acknowledgement of Ethan's words. As the fire dies down, a sense of ease settles between them. Ethan meticulously cleans his rifle, while Tala checks their dwindling supplies. Their movements are efficient and practiced, and an unspoken camaraderie flows between them. Finally, Tala leans back, resting her arms on her knees as she looks at Ethan. "What about you?" Tala asks, her voice barely above a whisper. "What keeps you going?" Ethan exhales slowly, leaning back against the log. "I suppose it's the hope that there's something better out there," he replies, his gaze distant. "Something worth finding." A faint smile touches Tala's lips. "Maybe there is," she says softly. Ethan looks at her, and for a fleeting moment, their eyes meet. The atmosphere between them shifts, becoming warmer, more intimate. They lapse back into silence, but the unspoken connection between them is undeniable. They are no longer just two individuals traveling the same path. They are partners, bound by trust and a burgeoning sense of kinship. The night deepens, and the fire burns low, casting long shadows around them. Tala lies on her side, her head resting on her folded arms, gazing up at the starlit sky. Ethan remains awake, his eyes fixed on the glowing embers of the dying fire. "You should get some rest," Tala murmurs, her voice breaking the stillness. "I will," Ethan replies, though he makes no move to lie down. His mind is a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, memories of the war, the faces of the men he lost, and now Tala. As Tala's breathing evens out, indicating she has fallen asleep, Ethan glances at her. There's something about her quiet strength and resilience that both intrigues and humbles him. She carries her own burdens, her own battles, but she does so with a grace he finds both captivating and inspiring. For the first time in a long time, Ethan feels a flicker of hope ignite within him. It's a small spark, but it's enough to keep him going. The night is tranquil, the only sound the crackling of the dying fire as Ethan and Tala rest. Ethan, still recovering from his injury, insists on taking the first watch while Tala sleeps. Suddenly, a sharp rustle in the undergrowth shatters the quiet. Ethan's grip tightens on his rifle, his heart pounding in his chest. He rises slowly, scanning the darkness for the source of the noise. Before he can react, 3 figures emerge from the shadows. Bandits, their weapons drawn and glinting in the firelight. "Well, well," one of them sneers. "Look what we have here." Ethan raises his rifle, his jaw clenching in determination. Tala stirs awake, her hand instinctively reaching for the knife she keeps at her side. "What do you want?" Ethan demands, his voice low and steady. "Everything," the leader of the bandits replies, stepping closer. "Your supplies, your weapons, and maybe even your lives." Ethan's finger hovers over the trigger, his mind racing. They are outnumbered, and his injured ankle throbs with renewed pain. But surrender is not an option, not now, not ever. The bandits advance quickly, their leader barking orders. Ethan fires his rifle, forcing one of them to duck behind a tree. Tala springs to her feet, her knife flashing as she charges towards another attacker. The sounds of gunfire and clashing steel echo through the clearing. One of the bandits lunges at Ethan, knocking the rifle from his grasp. Ethan throws a punch, connecting with the man's jaw, but the movement sends a jolt of pain through his injured leg. He stumbles and falls to one knee. "Ethan!" Tala cries out as she fends off another attacker. Her movements are fluid and precise, but they are facing overwhelming odds. As one of the bandits raises his weapon to strike Tala, Ethan reacts without hesitation. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he lunges forward, shielding her with his own body. The knife intended for Tala plunges into Ethan's side. The bandits hesitate momentarily, surprised by Ethan's selfless act. Tala seizes the opportunity, lunging at their leader, her knife finding its mark. The remaining bandits, realizing they are outmatched, retreat into the darkness, their curses fading into the distance. Tala falls to her knees beside Ethan, her hands trembling as she presses a cloth against his wound. "Why did you do that?" she whispers, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan manages a weak smile. "Couldn't let them hurt you," he rasps. "You're a fool," she says, her voice soft despite her words. Her eyes, filled with a mixture of gratitude, worry, and something more, meet his. Ethan winces, his breathing labored. "I've been called worse," he manages, attempting a joke. Tala works quickly, her hands surprisingly steady, despite the fear gnawing at her. She tears strips of cloth from her own tunic to bandage Ethan's wound, her movements efficient and gentle. "You're going to be all right," she says, her voice firm, though the words sound more like a desperate plea than a statement of fact. As dawn paints the sky with streaks of gold and rose, the forest awakens, bathed in a soft, ethereal light. Ethan stirs, his face pale with pain, but his eyes filled with a newfound resolve. Tala gently helps him to his feet, her arm supporting his waist as he leans on her for strength. "We'll make it," Tala says, her voice unwavering, her gaze locked with his. "We have to." Ethan manages a weak smile. "With you by my side," he says, his voice raspy, "I think I just might." Together they set off once more, their footsteps slow and measured, a testament to their shared determination. They speak little as they traverse the rugged terrain, but the silence between them has transformed. It is no longer the strained silence of strangers, but the comfortable quietude of two souls who have found solace in each other's company. They are no longer merely two lost individuals struggling to survive. They are companions, their bond forged in the crucible of shared hardship, their fates intertwined. They walk on, their steps carrying them deeper into the wilderness, towards an uncertain future. But in their shared gaze, there is a glimmer of hope, a spark of resilience that refuses to be extinguished. Their journey is far from over. The wilderness remains a formidable adversary, and countless challenges still lie ahead. But they face the unknown together, their bond a source of strength and comfort in the face of adversity. And as they walk on, hand in hand, they know that they are not merely surviving, they are living and loving and finding a new beginning in the heart of the wild. Ethan and Tala's story is a poignant reminder that even amidst the harshest landscapes, love and hope can take root and blossom. It is a tale of courage, connection, and the enduring strength of the human spirit to heal and find solace in unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story of adventure and the human spirit, be sure to subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories for more captivating narratives from the American frontier.